Clifford, hold yours.
Fine, thank you very much. My name's Clifford Shelley, Oxford Software Engineering, and I'm a consulting software engineer. What I'd like to talk about is not specifically aimed at lean, but it's a good enough target, I think, to start with. What I'm really after is a word, a name, and I'm asking you to give me that name, XDD. That was the original title. I was asked to come up with something a little less cryptic, so lean but not anorexic was second best. As we go through, can you ask questions as we go? And if I seem to be getting too much into my stride, just shout, yell, wave, and I'll answer questions or defer them if I address them later. Right, I'll start with a quote. This was written nearly 40 years ago. No, more than 40 years ago, before there was software metrics and before there was any idea of software process, for that matter. I don't expect you to agree with it, but it's worth asking why it was written. Here's another one, and I don't expect you to agree with this at all. It's completely outrageous. This was written at the beginning of MIT's Programming 101 course book. Have some fun in computing. When it started out, it was fun. Of course, the customers got shafted every now and then, but so what? Outrageous. Perhaps. Again, you're not going to agree with it, but again, ask why. I was prompted to put this talk together following attendance at a software measurement conference. There are such things. And I happened to be sitting on a stream where function point people were talking about estimating. And I didn't go to sleep. And I became outraged at what was being told. They were looking at data from various sources and attempting to find a way with coming up with a standard developer work rate so that they could plan projects based on cost per unit of software delivered. Essentially, you have interchangeable resources that deliver, extrude code at a given rate so you can anticipate when the system will be delivered. And I thought this was such a horrible, horrible model. I started to wonder why we are going this way. And the contracts are in place that expect this sort of performance now. And that's why I think software development is increasingly a pretty miserable profession. It used to be fun. For developers now, it's not much fun. So what I want to try and do is persuade you to take notice of something, and I don't have a name for it, and I hope someone will have, that we tend to neglect, pay lip service to a lot, and then ignore. And it matters in design-intensive work because it is pretty consistently suppressed, and that is the word, suppressed. Even though it makes us more productive, and it makes our lives better, more fulfilling. I will describe how you get this thing, but I want a name for it, and that's my problem. So what is this factor X? And I think it's actually very akin to the X factor. Alan, yes.
Quality without a name.
It is. And when it's got a name, it will be wonderful. So is it fun? Alan Pellis was talking about. Well, yeah, no, sort of. Fun has connotations. I was rummaging around through Google looking for synonyms and pictures, and they're all childlike, primary colors. And it's not that, really. It's far more important. In part, and it is in part, this isn't a prescription or a recipe, the conditions to work effectively with others as a valued member of a real good team. Conventional piety is there. Most teams are what I would think of as A-teams, and I don't mean they run around doing exciting things and blowing things up. They're like A-teams in the same way that amoral is a lack of moral. It's a group of people doing a job. They may or may not get on. They do deliver stuff, but they're not really a good team. And teams are critical. They are the unit of production, not people, teams. Individually, it's the ability to get engaged with doing design work. Flow, not lean flow, but the creativity flow, I think, is well known. In the zone, developers used to talk about, I don't know if they still do. Play. You really do change state. This is physiological, changing state. There are others. If you've ever hunted for something, hunted for food, the way your mind works changes. And if you're being hunted, it does as well. And it's real. This is nothing special. We don't have to invent it. There are no models. It's just the way we are. It's natural. It makes us perform better and feel better. It amplifies curiosity, problem solving, our ability to see the unexpected, to create, and our imagination. And if we are doing design work, and you could argue that we're not, a lot of what is called software development work is little more than clerical work now. But if you think you're doing design-intensive work, you should be valuing this. How many people have actually been formally taught or how to change state to do design work? Is it anything? Do you know what I'm talking about here? Who's a software developer? Do you know what I mean when you get into the code and you're somewhere else? You were never told how to do this or why to do this. It's just...
I know it's very much conflicting.
It's embarrassing. I mean, we don't talk about this stuff. We're interested in productivity, which we shouldn't be. This is critical. To deliver value is another difficult word. I can't think of a better one. It's going the same way as quality. It's becoming debased, but it's the best one I can come up with. It's a bit too abstract. We need to sort of deconstruct it. And it makes us more productive, which is a really good thing. We like it, we feel better. And it's got nothing to do with productivity, which is terrible. This is an adjective, and that's good. As soon as it turns into a measure, especially one with the devil's operator and a division sign, it's something to do with output over input, it becomes destructive. I've just spent 25 years studying, promoting software measurement, and I'm completely bemused by its utter failure. I think I know what's going on, but productivity measures do damage almost exclusively. If you come across them, walk away. So how do you recognize this factor X? High energy. This isn't pumping up the team. It comes naturally. There's a hustle. There's purpose about the team. The bullshit disappears. Mediocrity is pushed out. The best is what you're aiming for. Interesting things start to happen, and there's a challenge. It doesn't have to be an exciting application or anything like that. Really mundane development work can generate really good teams, and there's a challenge. And here's a tree. It's got nothing to do with the slides. My slides are pretty miserable, as you saw, the bullet points. I quite like them, but I've been told I need to inject some interest. So I've put a tree there. This is called the Tree of Life, Bahrain, somewhere like that. And it's the sort of tree you'd like to sit under. Right, where were we? Now, business is really, really good at putting in place repetitive production transaction processes, but dreadful at the creative and design processes. It just doesn't get it. Individuals do, but businesses are dumb and they like simple, repetitive processes. So anything that is non-repetitive and delivers value, they're likely to make a mess. What we tend to do is try and adapt production processes, and I havered over this, misusing or using production processes, and I don't know quite where to place this, to deliver value proxies, like productivity, like the contracts that insist on function points per $100 or whatever it is they pay, and by frightening people to perform by all sorts of nice means. Appraisals, organizational, check you up, do you meet the mark? Performance targets, bonuses are also dreadful and they damage everything. Productivity, performance targets, personal goals, key performance indicators, favorite use of measurement, does nothing but damage, and we know it doesn't work. We've known it doesn't work for years and years and years. Deming says things about this. He wrote about it in his 80s book, Out of the Crisis, and it's awkward truth, so we tend to walk around that. John Seddon is a bit of a hoot.
Can you explain why it's everywhere then? So if it doesn't work...
Because it's the best we can do. We will persist in doing things that don't work if it seems like, what else can you do? We've got to do something.
Take on democracy.
Exactly. It's impossible. I have been trying to get software measurement to work effectively and trying to stop people doing it ineffectively. People prefer to do the wrong thing that they are familiar with than stop doing it. It makes people very unhappy. They will do the wrong thing. Dan Pink also talks about how attempting to set targets and measure performance damages performance. Dan Pink you can find on the web, TED Talks. John Seddon is a UK guru, a bit of a hoot if you get to talk to him. Edward Demings is dead, I'm afraid, but his books are good. Very difficult books. It takes a long time to figure out what he's saying. So we need to do something else. What? Value teams more than resources. This is probably a bit controversial. It's not that difficult, actually. Organizations treat people so badly now, it shouldn't be that difficult to treat teams better, but we seem to manage to make a mess of that too. I'm fortunate that I can move around from various organization to various organization and see what's going on. But you find in large organizations in particular, the large contracting organizations, people are cattle, basically. They're told where to go, what to do, they're traded, and it's a miserable business. HR people try, they make a mess of it. Why value teams more? Well, teams will look after the people within them if you get it right. I was talking with Ben about how you do this. How do you make sure a team actually works? It's a bit of a cop-out. I don't know. I mean, some teams do go dysfunctional, but given it's natural, given a chance, good teams will form if you stop suppressing them and messing about with the organization, inflicting method and solutions on them. Excellence, more than conformance. Conformance is valued in production engineering, consistency, predictability, uniformity, statistical process control, straight off the production line. Incredibly important. Disastrous in design work. We don't want consistency. We don't want uniformity. We want excellence, a great design. And that's what people instinctively go for. Do you aim for the standard numbers of errors in a design, or do you want to get them all out? Do you prefer a good design? How do you recognize a good design? We're very, very poor at recognizing excellence. Individuals do. Then what happens? How does the organization recognize them? We haven't even got a name for it. Engagement's more than compliance. There is a very strong drive to have standard methods. I spent a lot of time looking at CMM, CMMI. Actually, I think I was the first person outside the US to use CMM in exactly the opposite way that it is used now. The idea of standardizing and complying with process to build confidence is important in some aspects, but not as important as you would think. Given that so much of what we do is tacit and implicit, and it really is, you don't need to worry about compliance except for the bean counters and the auditors. Engagement is far more important. And critically, value the work. Any reward that isn't intrinsic damages the work. Performance targets, bonuses, all of that wrecks the ability to do the work. Again, well known, nothing new, but we still do it. And I don't actually have solutions for how you stop this happening. I think the first step is to recognize what a mess the business culture is for design-intensive software engineering work. There's another one. Again, I was hunting for something particular when this came up. It's quite nice. And I was wondering whether I actually glued it together and cheated or whether they really did stack them up. But they're all blue, actually, all these pictures. Right. So how do you do this? You're not going to like this section. Although, interestingly, I thought I was going to be taking a strictly contrarian view here, but actually I think I'm agreeing with rather a lot of people, which is worrying here. There seems to be a sort of a culture of contrarianism. Acknowledge what isn't working as well as it could. Most people can't. A few will, and they'll usually get fired. This is career limiting. You've got to watch this. You can't go rushing back and say, this is terrible, this is a lot of people profit from the status quo. And if you try and nudge the status quo, you might be in trouble. You will be in trouble. But look for better ways. The default approach here, excuse me, is to, oh, it's terrible, we're going to stop doing that and we're going to do something else. We're going to be lean or agile or something. Doesn't matter what it means, it's let's turn over a clean sheet and do something. New managers have to do this. It's part of the psychology of demonstrating your power. Stop doing what you're doing, we're doing it my way. And it tends to be it's the wrong way to do it in software development. You have to understand where you are starting from. And this is understand your circumstances, not get someone in to understand them for you. You have to know this for yourself. If you're told what your circumstances are, you've made a mess. The way you do this is reflection. I think this has probably been mentioned 2 or 3 times. It's well understood. It's not done. It's difficult. Retrospectives are extremely well understood. Everybody has probably participated in them, but mostly doesn't. They are difficult because they usually don't deliver anything. There is a mechanism that I believe is well known as the double loop. That rarely comes into play, so people give up, and it comes as a closed down administrative shutdown meeting at the end of sprints, projects, whatever. Appraisals are very good. This may sound incredible, but in the early days of CMM, appraisals were a fabulous diagnostic tool. The organization loved it. Developers thought they were great because it got you to say how things really were without getting fired. They've turned into an audit now, tick box exercise, so people can claim various things about their organization, and it's a waste of time. But an understanding of the way things are. I thought I ought to drop this in as a sort of nod to the lean people, but they're useful. They are a bit focused, over-focused. But what you can do is hunt around for what's getting in the way. Developers know this. A lot of, I mean, they're not people. One of the really good things about this business is the people are smart and they know what works and what doesn't work. Ask, find out what's going wrong. Search for the inhibitors, the blocks to naturally good ways of working, which seem to be indicated by good teams that are really teams, where there is degree of dependence. Not dependencies, that you can depend on these people, working well and enjoying themselves, if nothing else. And get rid of them. Incidentally, if you do adopt this way of building your capability, building in, recognizing factor X, it's free. And I don't mean quality is free or there's a good return on investment. I mean, literally, you will get paid money to reimburse you for your cost of consultants, the time your people spent experimenting and making a mess. There is money to be had. It doesn't cost you anything. Identify the inappropriate models. There's a lot of them. The poor processes and practices. People are naturally looking for the solution. I think this morning someone said, how do you compare Kanban with Scrum, with Lean, with something else? You don't. You look in your organization to find out what is getting in the way of people doing a good job. What are the poor processes and practices? You can't do this ad hoc, you will get fired. You need to have some sort of official sanction to do this, or keep it very well hidden. I mean, if it's within a team, just do it for yourself. What are the poor performance measures? Well, actually, most of them. Look for anti-patterns. What you are doing when you're developing systems is working another system. It's your development process is itself a system. Essentially, you're debugging it. I mean, if you put some code together, a system together, do some testing, and you find defects, you don't throw it away and start again, you fix them. You can do the same with your own development practices. These are the things that suppress value, however you have interpreted it, and you do have to interpret this. It's not easy. Again, alignment with the business to a point. I think we take too much notice of what the business wants. Half the time it doesn't know. We know more than we think we know. So there's a dialogue to be had there rather than just going cap in hand and asking. Fail to recognize excellence. How do you recognize excellence in your organizations? I'm interested in this. I believe there are ways, but I don't know that we do it particularly well. What do you do if something is a really cool piece of work? Just nod and carry on. Yes. Well, that's right. Well, promotion, yes. So you lose the know-how is a very, very common way of doing it. It's dreadful, but we just can't do this. And it damages motivation, of course. The best people know that they're not, their work isn't acknowledged, recognised, and they go. And you get exactly what you want. If you wanted a standard, conformant, uniform process, you will get it. As a bad process, I thought that was rather, well, it could be the next step, but who knows? Could be some issues there, debugging required. You have to look carefully and critically, and one of the reasons I am here today is carefully and critically at what is being offered by the alternative models, Kanban, whatever it is. These are reference models, of course. They've been seen to work somewhere. They've been generalized so that it can be taught, shown, introduced, but they're not anywhere near as important as your operational models, what you actually do, which will never conform to the standard model. Something to watch out for, it's happened in other areas, is if there ever becomes a standard Scrum process, and it's interesting that there seems to be a sort of a drive to make it standard, you worry. And in the early days of Scrum, I was talking to Alan about this earlier, the iteration cycle could be of any length you wanted, really, order of months, and that's fine. It's difficult now to find people considering more than a month, and there is a push to 2 weeks. And I've even seen, if you really want to get it right, it's got to be a week. It's a sort of a machismo thing. If you're doing real Scrum, you've got to do it exactly the way we say.
It's what I've found the crossing with Scrum, having sort of been very keen on it earlier, it's actually the consultants that are looking for ways of justifying what they do by standardizing this stuff. Scrum started out as a very intelligent thing to me, which is a way of asking questions about what works and what doesn't work in your teams.
Yes.
It's just there to highlight where things are going wrong, and how you solve it is down to you and your team and your experts within your team, and you work it out. And that's all it is.
Yeah.
Now we have highly paid people telling us they know everything about this.
Yes.
It's lost its purpose. It's
Yes.
just a way of making money. And
Yes.
that seems to be what the sort of, Agile Alliance and these people are doing. You become certified in
Yes.
asking a couple of questions, 3 questions,
Yes.
How do you become certified in that? It's just an utter nonsense.
Yes, it is.
Not just 3 questions, you need a 2x2 matrix as well.
Well, you add the matrix in, and then you do a bit of software development, and the tools are doing it, and as long as you bought the tool, therefore you're doing Scrum, and therefore everything's going to be fine, and then you find it isn't, and then you say it's Scrum's fault.
Yes.
Agile's rubbish. It's just, but it's people want to make money out of it.
It happens. It will happen with whatever you like now. This happened with CMM. It was a movement. It was a brilliant idea, and then it turned into a business, and now it's a racket. Same thing has happened. The lessons have been learned. There are these, you'd be certified in this, that, something else. The model becomes caricatured because, to be fair, if you don't caricature it, people will interpret it as this or that and make a mess of it. And if you're trying to promote something, seeing people make a mess of it is extremely frustrating. So you have got to sympathize with them. But that's what happens. And it's going to happen, well, it's happening with Lean now, and it will happen with Kanban. And it doesn't mean they're bad ideas, because they're not. It's so frustrating to watch it turn bad, but it does. So the alternative is look at these, pick out the good bits, and since this is a Lean, I like, it's probably obsolete now, but I don't care, Mary Poppendike's book, this one, Lean, the Toolkit, great book. Lots of wisdom in there, and you wouldn't know from reading that how bad it could go, but it does. Look at these models, understand what's on offer, spend some time doing some research, and that doesn't mean being certified or trained. Do it yourself. These aren't difficult, but you do need to spend some time. Look at the fashion and the pundits, but just don't expect a solution packaged. It doesn't work that way. And then pick the bits you want. And I thought I would get into trouble, actually, today saying that. But actually, other people seem to be saying it too, so I'm fairly happy with that, because this is the way it actually works. Take a look at how the organizations that are good at developing software go about getting what they get. They don't have a standard anything. It's always slightly different. And what we mean by a good software organization, it depends. I mean, Google used to be very, is Google still cool? I don't think their development practices are particularly great, but because they're rich and famous, everyone wants to be something to do with Google. Microsoft were loathed. Are they still loathed? All right, fine. Figure out how they develop their software. Because their software, again, perhaps not a nice thing to say, is actually not bad. I don't like it, but it's not bad software. And they've got a process that gives them what they want. How did they get that? Linux. How did that work? I mean, good grief. Look at the ways of working. Select the bits you want and steal them. Well, this is intellectual property that no one really has a grasp on. Incrementally compose, refine, grow, validate better ways of working, having thrown out the... If this sounds familiar, it should do. It's how you put software together, systems together. It's actually the same way you put software development processes together. They're the same. You start from where you are because your asset base is pretty good. I know a couple of organizations, well, one in particular actually, who've got a really good software process that isn't quite working. Sadly, they're not in a position to fix it or hire me. And it's nearly there. And I know what's going to happen because they're having a reorganization. The new boss is going to come in and he's going to throw out this nearly working. All it needs is a good prod and it will work like a dream. But they're going to lose it, I'm sure. Don't. Your asset base is that. It's an asset base. It's not a legacy. It's not a disaster. Don't dump it. Study it scientifically, if you like, objectively. Tune it. Find out what you're going to put in place. And it's not just productivity, which is a stupid, stupid measure. Predictability is often highly desirable. We know when we're going to deliver. It might not be exactly when you want, but it will be there. Responsiveness, synchronicity. A lot of these models are how you have a team doing something and deliver. A lot of organizations are very concerned about how the teams interact dependably. Really difficult problem, actually. Really, really difficult. But it's a business driver. This is non-trivial, and how you get the attributes from your teams is often counterintuitive, or, for dogmatic reasons, unattractive. We don't do that in Scrum or Kanban. I don't care. I really don't care. If it's going to work, try it. Accommodate those elements within the structures, the process models, these aspects of design-intensive work that give you this ability to do creative work. You want muddle, jumps, exploration, hiatus, insights, someone was talking about the scientific method. Almost no one does the scientific method. And as you see it reported, is not how I used to be a scientist at one time. It's a mess, but there is method in the madness. Experiments, allow serendipity. Listening to Dave Snowden this morning, so it was very interesting. There's a lot of truth in what he says. I hadn't heard him speak before, but I shall watch with interest. This is critical. It is the complementary side to structure. Don't know about flow, actually. Flow in Kanban or lean terms actually does worry me. It's only a metaphor. Nothing is actually flowing at all. So if you take the metaphor too literally, I think you can get into serious trouble here. You could use growth as just as good a metaphor. So do watch it. If you're not careful, all of this can be interpreted by management as risk, cost, delay, waste, eliminate waste. Well, most of this stuff isn't waste. Just watch out. You've got to be very, very, very careful. And I am concerned, actually, that we do lift so much from the production environment because these methods, these sorts of things, they have their own agenda. You may think you know what you're doing with them, but they will exert their own agenda on the way you adopt them. And with plenty of factor X. If it's good for software development, it's good for improving the software development process. Incidentally, this is agile process development, just like agile software development. Very, very similar. You could say it's lean. It's messy, it's exploratory, contingent. You must allow failure, which is a real problem in many organizations. When you have problems in software organizations admitting defects. So with this, it's even more problematic, and you've got to be aware of that. You can't, it's not worth risking your career. So put in lots of factor X, because this is systems development. So to summarize, basically recognize and cherish this. Do you recognize what I'm talking about here? When you have a really good team. Who's worked in a good team? You know, a really good team. So you know what I'm talking about. And if you're software developers, you will know good software development. You know, you go in, you start work, and you look up, and there's loads of coffee cups, it's gone dark, the office is cold. That was a good day. Often it doesn't seem like it until you come back the day later. Yes?
Just wondering, it seems as though the topic is about value, right? So if you can quantify somehow that you can deliver value to somebody, and qualitatively check that somebody says, I think you're delivering value,
Yes.
and all the terminology of how you get there, whether it's agile, lean, systems thinking, it's just a recipe that you pick from to determine
Absolutely.
how you get it, and experiment with that until you can develop more value.
Yes.
So if you do that, that's what it's all about. So maybe it's value-driven development, and all those terms are just recipes that allow you to get some value to your customers.
That could be it, yeah. Well, the weakness is value is on its way to be a dumb word, but that's close, that's really close, I quite like it. Yeah, so factor X, which is, if you know you're delivering value, it's fun, a bit embarrassing, but if it's fun, recognize it. Forget being a lean, mean delivery machine and all that horrible, horrible stuff. Don't disregard the current case of work. They are really pretty damn good. Tread carefully, step at a time. You are going to run into management perceptions in some organizations, others are going to be far more open. Generally speaking, the organizations that tend to be more accommodating to this rather messy approach are those where the management understand the business of software development. So it could be software companies, not contracting organizations, but software companies that have software products, engineering companies, because you often find engineers, well, it's engineering. Where it does run into trouble is where you've got the IT guys providing the infrastructure to an organization that does something else. And then you've got a culture clash, value clash. So you've got to be very, very careful. For example, banks. This is really tricky. Oh, there's another picture. It's blue. I actually came across this beginning of the year when, in its wisdom, the Foreign Office decided to rename part of this Queen Elizabeth II land on the Queen's Jubilee. This is part of Antarctica. It's claimed by Argentina, who's getting restless, so we decided to give them a prod. I actually worked there for a while, and if I'm lucky, I shall be back here this time next year. But we'll see how it goes. Right, so my name, I like value a lot. What I've come up with, I've got some others as well, and then none of them, these are all slightly embarrassing, aren't they? I mean, you can't have fun doing, you know, and it's laughable. Purpose-driven, I love Alistair Coburn's approach. Altered states, game-driven development after Alistair Coburn, collaboration. Great, but they're either not acceptable or a bit weak. Value-driven is going there. Esprit de corps is something that you would find in a good team. It doesn't really fit. It's foreign as well, certainly. So give me a name, guys.
I've got something that fits, but it's not a word. It's not one word.
Go on then.
And I've got it's a line from the Wikipedia entry for learning organisation.
Okay, yeah.
A quote from that. And I mentioned I was doing values for Kanban in Chicago, and this will come into my talk. Peter Senge stated in an interview that a learning organisation is a group of people working together collectively to enhance their capacities to create results they really care about. I really like that.
I think that is actually on page 1 of Fifth Discipline, because I was looking at a quote for the learning organisation the other day, and that's pretty much, I think it's about the third paragraph down.
Yeah.
I can't read that book. I don't know why. It just really upsets me.
I didn't like section 1, and I got to the middle of the book, and I thought this is the best thing I've ever this decade.
So since you give me a lead in, Mike, you know, I did write a book about this myself 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Sixth discipline.
No. But no, for me, a lot of this is pure learning organisation stuff. This is exactly what Senge and others are talking about. I mean, Dave Snowden doesn't quite agree with that. His interpretation of Senge is that there's an end point in mind, and Senge is trying to reach that. I'm not sure I agree with that, but Dave's point is you have to flip into this chaotic state, and you're refining the end point.
Yeah.
But I think all this fits under that learning organisation umbrella.
I think I hate doing. I tend to be fairly simple-minded. I used to be a scientist and engineer, and all this touchy-feely stuff irritates me. But I think it's right, and I can't really get a handle on it.
So the link you're looking for to this conference is, if you read any good book on lean, normally in the final few chapters they say the secret of lean is building a learning organisation.
Yeah.
And if they spill the secret there, but most people don't make it that far.
Yeah.
Read Roller or Spear if you want something more digestible.
Okay. Well, simple is good. I like simple. Yes.
It's worse than touchy-feely, it's politics.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, absolutely. That's very interesting. I was another. I tend to be a bit of someone called a slut. I go to all of these things. A requirements engineering meeting where someone talked about the power of requirements engineering, the politics of requirements engineering, and the audience really didn't like this. It's analyst types, you know, slightly autistic. Leave me alone. Let me do my job. And the idea that there was any politics in play in requirements analysis just, didn't like that at all. And you're absolutely right.
Did Alistair Coburn talk about that with his Meet Fluffy? He was on stage at TED. It was like when the software engineer moves up to from tech lead to running the software team. You know, Fluffy is all the fluffy stuff, but Fluffy's a lion. He's going to get taken down by this people stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
yeah. Well, it's
Is it just a sort of, I don't, I'm from an arts background. I'm not from a technology background. But the first thing I'm thinking of is jazz, right?
yes.
There's no rules, particularly, but each person in there is highly skilled
Yeah.
and knows where they're going with what they're doing,
Yeah.
and they're in tune with everyone else in the team.
Yeah.
And although there is a form of structure, it's a very light structure, but because they know what they're doing and they know how to work with the other people, that they will reach something that is quality and value. And it's a bit of a sort of maybe a bit of a distant thing, but it's like you talk about. It's been mentioned quite a lot. the sort of lean thing coming from manufacturing, it's a slightly different thing to software development, and it's not.
I think it's seriously different.
They don't work in quite the same way. Now, I was just, it struck me just now as you're talking, when they want to demonstrate width limits and how effective they are in improving stuff. They play the game with making paper aeroplanes and doing things, sticking things together. They revert, when they're training these things, you revert to manufacturing.
Yeah.
It's never a software exercise to
Yes.
demonstrate how work in progress limits work.
Hmm.
And it's a,
Not sure my class is, but anyway.
I'd like to know what you did.
You're invoking jazz metaphors, you're talking about politics, you're talking about learning organization. You know what, all this stuff, the umbrella, all this goes under, it's a word you don't like, and you particularly don't like it if you're a certified Scrum Master. Management. You're talking management. I have an MBA, I can bullshit on this stuff. You're talking MBA curriculum. And for my money, a lot of the answers lie in good management. I teach just an atrocious management. A lot of engineers are trying rediscovering a lot of these ideas.
Maybe. I mean, what strikes me is the diverse. I mean, we talk about the industry, software development. It's massively diverse. Jazz, I think, and music, or in fact, composing music, writing, creative writing, is also interesting. However, on the other side, you have writing the software, building the software to control the floodgates for Rotterdam. Now, that's engineering, and you must be clear, explicit, rational. And it's a different game, but it's still engaging and fun. So I think we have to acknowledge software is just distinctly weird. So that's essentially it. I had a couple of. I was hunting for images and failed. This actually comes out of this book, Who Stole It From Somewhere Else. This is an image of what's going on when you're developing. These are the levels of abstraction. So this is a scenario, that's the solution. What's going on in their brain, and basically all sorts of stuff. That's how coding works. That's how coding works. And it's just the non-linear, messy nature of that I like, because we tend to suppress these ideas. This is another one, a design process that I quite like. You're busy fumbling around for the solution, nothing's happening, you made a mistake, and then bang, it's there. I came across this one in a book of design methods for industrial design, nothing to do with software. Interestingly, spiky, irrational. And this I thought was good as well. I don't know why it's good, but it's right. Priest explaining the zigzag arch. This is the bridge over the Japanese bridge over the ponds with a carp. Evil is like a rhinoceros. It always charges in straight lines. We break the line of the bridge so that evil cannot cross, but falls over the edge to drown in the deep waters in the middle. It sort of fits. I have no idea why, but I like that. So this should be easy. Jerry Weinberg, who made that quote at the beginning, also said this. People are trying to be lean, put in Kanban, or whatever it is they're after, mature, and it usually doesn't work. I mean, the failure rate is the sort of nasty, dirty little secret that we don't tell you about. It doesn't make any difference. However, turn it upside down. This isn't hard. Some of the time, some places, significant change happens, especially when you don't work too hard. This isn't difficult. It's unpopular, but just the six-step approach I showed you generally works. Find the people who've got a really slick system that love it, and you will find they have done it that way. And you can think of it as agile process development.
Sorry to ask you whether Weinberg himself inverts the law, but that's something you
Yes. Yeah.
Google for that.
Yes, the book, I can't remember the name of the book. The Good Books, it wasn't in the good book, the famous books, it's in another one.
Secrets of Consulting?
Could well be. Sin book.
Yeah, I mean, Secrets of Consulting.
Could be. Yeah, Google, I mean, I presume it'll turn up somewhere. But he's a very, very interesting person, it's worth a check. He has a 4-volume set of books that basically cover all that we're thinking about now, 30 years ago. I mean, this remarkable man. Since I'm talking about books, This is an interesting, Gus Powers pointed me at this, and I think this is fascinating. Neil Postman is fairly well known for being a pest and a provocateur. Technopoly. As we slide into technopoly, things change, the value systems change, we lose our value systems and technology takes over. And I see this happening with our approach to software development, despite our protests that it's human-centered, value-driven and all the other things. It's not really happening. Final book is this, and it's slightly bizarre. David Ogilvy was an advertising executive, very famous in the 50s, 60s, had the account with Rolls-Royce. Before that, he was a chef. So he was used to dealing with creatives, both in the kitchen and the advertising agency. And his views on how you get creativity and value to work are quite interesting. They sort of run parallel to what we're thinking about. But,
What's his name?
David Ogilvy, Confessions of an Advertising Man. It's an easy read. So there we are. Right, I'll end there. Thank you very much. Oh, and official questions as well, I suppose. Yes.
You say measuring individual metrics is a bad thing.
Yes.
And that teams are a good thing.
No. I probably conflated things here. Metrics generally are a bad thing.
But is team metrics, is there any value in?
Yes, there are. The secret to
that seems to be like we recently talking about discouraging my team from recording time, but trying to preserve the team estimates that we're making at our planning meetings, and it's not really tied to anything. I haven't tied it to any
right.
apart from relative points in the past. So it comes with a coefficient of that team. So another team may, if they estimate in the same way, they may have slightly different.
All right.
There's a value. I see a value in that.
Yes.
I don't know where you.
The rules of metrics are almost exactly the opposite. Software measurement, the ability to transmit information, is presumed to give you transparency, visibility, and that's a good thing. You don't. Transparency and visibility are bad. You need to close down the metrics. Keep them within the team.
Right.
Keep them within the individual. They're private. If they become public, they become dysfunctional fast performance metrics, and I think other people have touched on this. It's not attractive. It's not what the metrics people think. You don't want to hear this. Transparency, visibility are supposed to be good things. They're not. They're bad. You can try, and you get, if you're lucky, they're useless.
It's useful within the team.
Yeah. The other thing is, don't do arithmetic. I mean, people are so keen to perpetrate arithmetic on stuff and come up with productivity. It's input over output. And don't use division ever. Percentages are useless. If you have to, add things. Graphics, just histograms or scatter plots, and just look. That's all you need. It's dead simple. It's yours. Keep it to your chest. If you want to share it, fine, but generally don't.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.